Thank you for joining us today on HXGN TV today. I'm your host, Scott Everling, and today we're here to talk about robots and accuracy, the big question, with Chris Blanchette, the National Account Manager at FANUC America, responsible for aerospace and assembly market development. Thank you, Chris, for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here, Scott. Thank you.
Chris, can you tell us a little bit about FANUC America and your responsibilities within that organization?
Sure. FANUC is actually based at the foot of Mount Fuji in Japan. Their global headquarters is located there, and the North American headquarters and the Americas headquarters is based in Rochester Hills, Michigan. FANUC actually produces machine tools, CNC controls, and robotics. We have over 3.5 million CNC machines globally and over 400,000 robots globally.
So what are your actual responsibilities at FANUC America?
So at FANUC, as you had mentioned earlier, I'm responsible for market development for assembly and aerospace, but I'm also responsible for understanding what the requirements are of the industry with regards to technological developments and making sure that our company has a track to develop those technologies to support the needs of future manufacturing.
And so what is the big question with robotics and accuracy? Why is there something in the industry with this unknown?
Well, the big question, everybody knows it, the big question is how accurate is your robot?
Yeah, but Chris, there's standards out there. There's the ANSI standard, RIA, there's the ISO 9283, there's the Japanese industrial standard out there that talks about robotics and accuracies and repeatabilities. So why is there this disconnect in the marketplace between what the definition in the standard is and what the equipment is actually capable of doing?
Well, the standards are a good foundation to understand sort of where a robot actually fits within the requirements of precision for a particular manufacturing task. But there's a lot more that you can attain from an accuracy perspective from a robot with relevant calibration technologies that are dependent more on the application than the standard defines.
So can you give us an example of the techniques and technologies that are used for some of these calibrations?
So every robot company has what I refer to as rudimentary calibration techniques. And the rudimentary calibration techniques are designed to, make sure that you can just work in your environment and know where you're at. And the three primary ones are what we call robot mastering, which is joint axis zero mastering. So the relationship of one axis relative to the other axis, you need to understand that very precisely on a robot in order to understand the world frame of the robot. The second one is TCP calibration. So very precisely, where is the tool center point on the end of your robot arm relative to the robot frame? You need to understand that in order to be able to use that tool on a part in the manufacturing process. The third one is frame calibration. Where is my part relative to my robot frame? If you're going to accurately manipulate that tool onto that part, you need to accurately know where that part is. So those are the three rudimentary calibrations. There's also a fourth one that I also refer to that is called a multi-arm or multi-axis calibration or Augs axis calibration, which allows you to calibrate a robot to another robot where you have a task where maybe two robots are working together on the same part. Or additionally, maybe your robot is on an external axis like a rail or a gantry type structure, or your part is being manipulated by a rotary table, and you need to understand the frames of those moving systems relative to the robot frame in order to be able to accurately manipulate around those auxiliary axes.
So with that rudimentary calibration, what typical types of accuracy can you get out of the robotics today?
Well, it varies typically on the size of the robot. So if you're talking volumetric accuracies, which is anywhere in the space of the envelope with any rotation, any payload, it can range from a small robot, 600 to 900 millimeter reach, a FANUC's LR Mate series robot, can typically be 1 or 2 millimeters. For a large robot, like an M900, which has a 3 meter reach, it can be 12 to 13 millimeters.
So what are some of the techniques that you use? You talk about standard rudimentary type calibrations. Are there some advanced types of calibrations that are used in the industry?
Yep, so there are. Typically, the way we start is by doing local referencing. So you implement your rudimentary calibration techniques, and then you might have features in a region in front of where the robot is going to be working that you understand where those features are relative to the part. and you would actually have a vision camera or some type of device to actually go measure where those features are, and then you would isolate your calibration to that local area. We call that local referencing, and that would make the robot slightly more accurate. In addition to that, we have other features that enhance the accuracy even further. One of them we call IR calibration signature. And the IR calibration signature, what it does is we use a laser tracker, a metrology device, and a target on the robot. And we manipulate the robot through 200 to 300 poses, and we measure where the robot is during those poses, and we calculate the unique parameters of that robot and identify those parameters, load them back into the robot, and then we move the robot with those unique parameters, and we're able to achieve a precision with IR calibration signature of, for small robots, of better than 1/4 of a millimeter in some cases, and on larger robots better than a millimeter.
So that seems impressive enough in terms of the standard calibration, but bringing that back into the manufacturing process, right? You've got the encoders map, you got the lengths map, you have some of these parameters mapped on the robot. Now you bring that back into manufacturing. How do you apply that? How do you use this in terms of the real world?
So some real world examples would be where, let's say you have a part that needs to be drilled very precisely, and the spacing between the holes need to be drilled precisely. So you could, and maybe there's hundreds or thousands of holes that need to be drilled. Traditionally, when a manufacturer or an integrator is putting a program together, they would go out and teach those points manually with a teach pendant. But if you have literally hundreds or thousands of features that you need to work on, you need to actually do that offline with offline programming. So FANUC has an offline programming suite we call RoboGuide, which allows you to do all of that programming offline. The problem with offline programming is now that you've programmed these thousands of points, you need to actually make sure the robot can go to those points based on a data-driven program. So the program is going to tell you to move to this location based on these nominal positions on the part, and the robot has to be accurate in order to get to those positions. So IR calibration signature, these calibration features allow you to do that and save time setting up. So for example, we've done studies where it shows you can save up to 85% of your integration time if you do offline programming and insert an accurate robot into that application.
That's very impressive. So what about other external forces that might be applied during the process, be it gravity, be it pressure from drilling, be it pressure from sanding? What other types of techniques does FANUC use to compensate the robot in those situations?
So every robot has their variation of compensating for elements like gravity and arm bending and so forth, which is mathematically calculated during manipulation of the robot. FANUC has a couple additional features that we have for calibrating those effects. One of them we call deflection compensation modeling, and that is where you actually have the tool contacting the part, and when the tool contacts the part, it actually deflects the robot. So we can actually predictively calculate what that deflection is going to be and apply a counter motion to negate that. So that's one of the features that we have. But in addition to that, FANUC has another feature we call a secondary encoder control. And what secondary encoder control is, we actually take another encoder and put it at the mechanical joint where the actual motion occurs, and we measure the true position of one joint relative to the other based on feedback from the secondary encoder, and we're able to very precisely control in real time the robot position past those elements of backlash within the mechanical unit.
So we now have some robots that have been calibrated. We're using some external techniques to make them even more accurate. Is there anything else out there in terms of tools in the FANUC bag to help make the robot even more accurate or more precise in a particular application beyond the data sheets?
So yes, we do. If you need to go even further beyond, there's what we call adaptive control of the robot. And there's a few different methodologies for that. The first one would be what we call visual servoing. Visual servoing is where you have maybe a vision sensor from the robot looking at a feature while it's achieving the precision that it needs for that manufacturing process. And in some cases, we were able to actually achieve better than 10 micron precision with a visual servoing type process, where you actually adjust the position of the robot with feedback from the sensor until you've achieved your tolerance, and then you execute the manufacturing task. The second one would be force control. So FANUC has integrated force control on the robot, which allows you to plug a 6 degree of freedom force sensor into the robot controller, and with the sense of touch, feel your way into an assembly. So we've been able to actually achieve precision assemblies with a tolerance between the two parts of 50 millionths of an inch. So these are things where you would say aren't possible with a robot if you just looked at the data sheet. The third one, and probably the most up and coming feature, is based on some of the 7DOF type stuff that Hexagon is doing, and a feature that we call DPM, Dynamic Path Modification. And what that allows us to do is take real-time input from a laser tracker, let's say, or any type of metrology device, sensor input, and adjust the position of the robot during motion or the endpoints in real time. So we have an example where we had to lay a stringer down, a composite stringer, on a composite skin for an aerospace project. And the part was about 10 meters long, so it was longer than the reach of the robot, and it needed to have adaptive control in order to maintain the precision requirements for that application. We used DPM and a Leica laser tracker from Hexagon to adaptively control the position of that stringer as it was being laid down and tacked onto that skin for that application. And that's a perfect example of how those technologies can enhance the manufacturing workspace.
So where do you see in the next 10 years the combination of robotics, automation, and metrology moving?
So I think that within the next 10 years, you're probably not going to see a robot that doesn't have the ability to have a lot of these enhanced calibrations added to it to make it more precise. I think that it's going to open the door to new manufacturing processes and reduce cost in accuracy-based solutions. So there's a lot of solutions out there right now that use very expensive machine tools, and it's cost prohibitive in the manufacturing process. I think robots will be able to manage a lot of those tasks at a much, much lower cost point, which will enable new products at cheaper prices, for the customer base, because they can use these accuracy features in robots.
So now you're a customer, you're out there, you've got a manufacturing problem that you're trying to address. You're looking at automation and robotics as a possible solution. You look at the spec sheet, as we talked about already, and it kind of gives you a different picture from what's actually achievable in the real world manufacturing processes. How would you suggest that these potential customers, go about finding a solution and interacting with FANUC America to understand what the potential is for solving their problems?
So that's a good question, Scott. FANUC has an integrator program, an authorized integrator program, where we partner with integrators like Hexagon Metrology, who's a partner, and we basically train our customers how to effectively use our products and how to use them for these types of applications specifically. And then when end users come to us, we actually direct you to our integrators that have this knowledge and have this partnership with FANUC. And that's one of the ways that you can identify what the capabilities are from an accuracy perspective that are sometimes hard to understand from a robot perspective, and get the experts on board with you.
And where would you go to find this information?
Yeah, so you can reach FANUC America online at www.fanucamerica.com, and you can reach out to our sales force from there, who would then give you contact to an integrator.
Well, thank you very much for being here today. Very informative. We would like to thank our guest, Chris Blanchette. For more about FANUC, visit fanucamerica.com. For more on HXGN TV, or to watch additional episodes, please tune in to hxgntv.com. Thanks for watching.